Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Guiding You Forward podcast presented by Mountain America. Today, we're talking about retirement. And thankfully, Chad Wattups is with us. Hi, Chad.
Hi, Kristalina.
And Chad is a vice president with Mountain America Investment Services. So now one other thing we need to talk about with retirement is healthcare. Right? That's, I think, a big part of retirement that sometimes, at least for me, I overlook in my planning. I think, oh, I've got my 401k, I'm good, right? Any advice or what are your thoughts as to what we need to be thinking about in terms of healthcare?
Well, first, you're absolutely right to be thinking about it. A lot of studies suggest that will be our biggest expense in retirement.
Okay.
I saw one recently that said we'll need upwards of $250,000 on the day we retire just to cover healthcare. That seems like a big amount, right?
Yeah.
And that's in addition to all the other expenses we'll have. So a couple of things to think about with healthcare is most Americans that are over age, get to age 65, most Americans will need long-term care at some point. And we think of long-term care sometimes as an insurance plan, but it's much more than that. It's assisting someone with their financial side of their life, the emotional side of their life, where they live, how they live. So that's one factor to look at, is how long-term care plays in. And then we also have Medicare. At 65, every American is eligible for Medicare, which the core Medicare value is that it provides for 80% coverage on our healthcare costs, which is enormous. That's very great benefit.
Yeah.
But there's still going to be medical costs that a lot of us will have, and we want to factor those into our planning.
Okay. So as we're factoring those in, I mean, are we looking at pre-existing conditions? Is that something our wealth advisor is helping us with? As we're planning out what those expenses might look like? Obviously, we can't predict what's going to happen to our health in retirement, right? If we could, that would be amazing. But
yeah, a wealth advisor can absolutely take a look at that as well. Here at Mountain America, we work with some Medicare specialists that come in and support Mountain America members. So looking at the income plan, looking at what you have available for health insurance through Medicare or long-term care, they all become part of the same plan. It's just your retirement plan, right? Okay. But absolutely, a good planner will take healthcare into account when they build your income plan and your retirement plan.
Awesome. And my parents recently retired. I say recently; it's been within the last 10 years.
That's recent.
Time is relative right now. Who knows? I still feel like it's March of 2019, right? Anyways, so they've recently retired, and I remember my dad saying particularly, hey, I'm actually making more money in retirement than I made, when I was working full time. Yeah. Is that typical?
I don't know if I'd say typical, but it's common.
Okay.
We love having those conversations, and we've had many of them where we sit down with a member that wants to do some retirement planning, and they say they're living on X today. And when we start putting together their Social Security, their pension, what we can generate from their savings, quite often they do come out making a little more money, or at least living on a little more money than they had been in the past. And it's a very satisfying conversation because we have people look at us and say, I can retire. People that maybe didn't think they could retire until they were 70 or 72, and now they're 65 and they realize, oh, I can do it now. And they're very excited about it, and that's very gratifying.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when I'm in retirement, obviously we have this emergency savings, right? That I think everyone says have at least 6 months in this emergency savings. Mm-hmm. Am I trying to still build up that savings with my different income streams when I'm in retirement? Or what does that look like? That advice?
When you transition to retirement, more of your assets are in cash-like instruments anyway. So naturally you would have that emergency fund available to you.
Okay.
The trick in retirement is having some assets that can continue to grow, but some that are producing income. And those that are producing income are more conservative, more safe, and could be considered more of that emergency fund. So you're probably not funding an emergency fund any longer, but you would certainly have an emergency fund.
Okay, awesome. Very, very good to know. I'm just trying to think about my budget and what it's going to look like, Chad, when I'm in retirement. Do I have to keep saving, So anyways, let's say even after we retire, obviously I'm thinking of my parents, right? And my dad's making more money than they're used to living off of, but they're traveling more. I have some family that lives overseas, so now they're traveling more to go see them. Maybe not this year as often as they'd like, but how often should we be meeting with our financial professional to make those adjustments to our plan?
Yeah, that's a great question because you don't really want to think about it all that much, right? Most of us don't.
Yeah.
We want to travel and go visit our family and just have the money be there available for us. So if you build a good plan, an effective plan, an annual review of it is sufficient.
Okay.
There's no reason to overthink it. You don't need to be looking at it on a daily or a monthly basis. But an annual review is pretty important just because things do change. And one of the things that changes most often in retirement is our health situation. And so we may need to reassess the income plan based on medical needs, medical costs, and especially that first or second year of retirement, because you have a vision of what retirement might be like, but then you live retirement for a year and you realize that wasn't quite what I thought. I'm either spending more or I have less needs than I thought I would have. It's going to be different when you get to that first year anniversary of your retirement.
Okay.
And that's a great time to sit down and reassess what the rest of your retirement might look like.
Okay, interesting. I remember going back to my father, he said, I asked him, I was like, are you bored? He's just, used to working all the time. And I was like, are you bored in retirement? And he's like, honestly, I suddenly wonder how I ever had time to work.
I remember asking my grandfather once what he did after he retired. And he said, I wake up in the morning, I've got nothing to do. And by lunchtime, I'm not halfway done with it. That's pretty descriptive
amazing.
on what retirement is.
Amazing. I love that. So Social Security, we know, can be super confusing. Going back to my parents again, I remember, my parents saying, oh, we probably started, taking withdrawals, for your mom a little too soon. We should have waited. How can we get help navigating Social Security and what that really is going to look like? Obviously, we can't predict the future.
Yeah.
But what are the resources for us there?
Well, that's so important because remember, with withdrawals comes tax implications. And so if you take from the wrong accounts or the wrong amount or more than you need, you've got tax implications that could affect your future ability to produce income. So there are plenty of resources available through a financial advisor, through that planning process. You pay people to work on your car because they're the experts on your car. Don't hesitate to meet with a financial advisor when it comes to your retirement planning, because that's what we do all day, every day. And they're complimentary consultations where you can get the help you need and allow somebody else to be part of that process with you.